Today was my second driving test to get my commercial driver's license, or CDL. I caught a ride down to the Department of Vehicular Safety, or DVS, which I guess is what they call the DMV in Minnesota. Still not entirely sure. And while I was there, I grabbed some food from a nearby Burger King and some coffee from Starbucks. And before I left Eagan, the town that DVS was located in, I dropped by the post office to temporarily change my mailing address. So, 4 interactions with 4 different institutions total was my day. 2 were private organizations, and 2 were government organizations. As I walked home during that 7 miles, before I got completely sucked into Malcolm Gladwell's new book, David and Goliath, which I highly recommend to everyone, the differences in my experiences at these 4 different places really stood out to me. And here's a brief summary of my day. First, Starbucks. My blood is probably 2 to 3% caffeine at any given time, so coffee was the first stop. I went into Starbucks and got a venti brewed coffee, medium blend, no room. And about 25 seconds and $3 later, I had my coffee, and it was great. The lovely young baristas were very polite, efficient, and they were smiling the whole time. It was, by any real measure, a good experience. If it hadn't been, I would have gone somewhere else. And so moving right along, I went down to the DVS and showed up a half hour early. I went in to turn in my paperwork, which they'd handed to me a week prior, and I found out that my driver's license paperwork and CDL permit were missing. Not good. Fortunately, they were willing to work with me and have me fill out an application for a replacement. I dutifully did so, trying not to imply too blatantly that they were the ones that had lost it, because one, that probably wouldn't have helped me very much, and 2, I probably should have checked on the paperwork last week and made sure they had in fact given me back everything. I don't think anyone smiled the entire time, and everything was done in a kind of lackadaisical fashion. You could see the eyebrows raise and the shrug sort of emanate from them whenever the next person came up to the counter. Now, to clarify, this was a retest. The first time I failed the driving portion, in part because, according to the examiner, he had to walk me through a turn step by step. I didn't ask him for the help. He chose to direct me, all by himself, and worse, he directed me to do the turn incorrectly. Now, there's 2 ways to make tight corners with a 53-foot trailer. There's what's called a jug handle corner, where if you're turning left, or left for the camera, you swing out to the right before you make your turn. This is what you don't want to do, because it confuses the drivers behind you. If you Google search jug handle turns, you'll get little diagrams labeling them with incorrect in all caps, or cute little exploding crash signs. Then there's what's called the button hook turns, where you drive past the turn and then correct the tractor back around. And this is what they want you to do, they being the people who write the textbooks about how to drive a commercial motor vehicle. Books like this that we got for our school, which is one of the best in the state. So everyone knows this except this examiner. He step by step walked me through a jug handle turn on this corner. Now, when I retook the test today, I made the same turn on the same corner with a button hook, and it worked just fine. You didn't need to do a jug handle on it. When I failed before, without even going out on the public road, where I failed before rather, without even going out on the road, I passed with flying colors today. The examiner today informed me, and I was actually only 2 points away from a perfect score. Well, you can probably guess what came after that test. More paperwork. I went back inside for another good 25 minutes with the mostly unsmiling government employees. There was one exception with a good sense of humor. So after that, I felt like eating, so I decided to go to the local Burger King. But first, I had to go to the post office to change my mailing address at the request of, you guessed it, the DVS folks. So I arrived there and see that the clerk at the post office is off from 1:30 to 2:30. Great. So I figured I'd grab something to eat in the meantime. Why not? Off to Burger King. Now, I don't eat there very often, so I was expecting it to be a bit like McDonald's or something like that. I ordered a small onion ring and the spicy chicken burger off their value menu, whatever it's called. Now at McDonald's, they actually make the chicken itself spicy in their spicy McChickens, or at least the deep fried skin is spiced. But at Burger King, they just slop on a kind of mystery red sauce that tasted like vomit in both directions. The onion rings weren't much better. They were barely fried and kind of soft, not crispy. So I decided that when given a choice, I'd go with good old McDonald's in the future, because really, is there such thing as a Burger King that isn't 2 blocks away from its yellow-arched competitors? Simple as that. All of that took about 5 minutes, and the employees there, even with the bad food, the employees there were nice, the establishment was very clean, and everything was efficient. I almost felt bad, actually, brutally deciding to avoid their store after they had worked so hard to please me. And those employees were working very hard. So finally I returned to the post office where the clerk had now returned. I waited in line for a couple minutes and informed him that I wanted to change my posting address. He didn't even look at me, just looked to the side, grabbed an envelope, handed it, and simply said, "Big card with a pink background." I opened up the envelope, and it was packed with advertisements for various companies, and there was no card with a pink background. I eventually did find the form I was looking for, though, folded up in the middle of the stack, underneath a Menards advertisement, I think. The background was pale orange. I filled it out in about 30 seconds, and then proceeded to wait in line for about 10 more minutes, as the clerk chit-chatted with some of the other customers. I listened a bit to what they were saying, and the customer asked the clerk if he was there all by himself. "Yep, they don't like having more than one of us here. They think it's a waste," he said. Customer: "What do you think about that?" Clerk: "I think they're crazy." Well, obviously. It was weird thinking about how culturally similar Starbucks was to the Burger King, and how similar the post office was to the DVS. Both of the former were fast, efficient, and friendly. It was all about moi, yours truly. At the latter two, I was probably the last thing on their mind or their priority list, and I can't help but suspect that money had something to do with that difference, where they got their income from, how their business plan, if you could call the latter two businesses, was structured. I can't help but speculate when I see and experience that vast and that huge of a difference in service, that separating pay from quality of service does horrible things to that service, and changes who that service fundamentally becomes about. Now there are a lot of people talking nowadays about socializing our healthcare, and Obamacare may or may not do this. I don't know very much about it, and I also suspect very few other people do. But when I think about this, socializing our healthcare, I think about all of my doctor's trips in the past. The family doctor I used to go to back in Washington was a guy by the name of Seth Fader. He was extremely knowledgeable, and as far as doctors go, was extremely quick and efficient in his diagnosis and all this, and was incredibly nice. This was the sort of the prized quality of, at least with my dad, my father, was nice doctors. He actually recommended a pair of biking gloves to me through my parents, which I now have. They are REI, and they're incredible. They're so warm. Amazing. He recommended those to me through my parents, and I haven't even visited him in probably several years. So I've had that experience, and I've also experienced military and government contracted doctors. I won't go into the bloody, gory details, and they are bloody, because that would be very long and probably would get my video flagged by someone as inappropriate for YouTube. But suffice to say, it was emotionally and physically painful. And they gave me, actually, the ulcerative colitis I still have today, the same disease that got me kicked out of the military without any GI Bill benefits. So when I think about the prospect of Obamacare and socialized health care, and the rules and funding they give to private insurance and healthcare providers, it really seems like a carrot and stick means of corrupting something beautiful, of taking a Burger King and turning it into a post office, or taking a Starbucks and turning it into a DMV. Imagine having to get your morning coffee from the DMV. That's something I don't think I'd wish on my worst enemy. Sounds like a Monty Python curse, doesn't it? May you be forced to buy your coffee from the Federal Post Office. Better get there before 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, but not in the mid-afternoon. Weekend, you're shit out of luck. But my parents are getting older and might start facing health problems soon. I love my parents, and I would fight with a gun to prevent them from having to get their health care in the second most vulnerable time of their life, behind infancy, from an organization run like the DMV or the post office, or heaven forbid from a military hospital. I might have kids to take to the doctor someday, and then I'll get older too, if all goes well. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't mind if I never set foot in another DMV or DVS or any other Ds again. And it boggles my mind that people want to import that culture to the rest of our societal institutions. This is something I think we should fight and argue against, tooth and nail. Food for thought.